Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. Also going on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Insta, everywhere. Ken, how's it going? Happy New Year, Ken.
It's going great. Happy New Year to you.
I've
It
got
feels like it's already mid-January, but yeah, Happy New Year.
yeah, the year's busy. We're gonna get into that actually, but let me introduce you first. So this is Ken Wallace. He's from Patient Advertising Guru. Uh, the founder or one of the founders? Can
No,
you maybe you introduce yourself better?
that sounds great. Actually, Evan Brett is the founder of Patient Advertising Guru, and I've known Evan for 20 some odd years. We'll get into my history in the patient recruitment world, but I've known Evan for about 20 years, and we always talked about the opportunity to work together. And a number of years ago, the stars aligned, and I kind of joined forces with Evan to do the things that we do. That I'm sure will. I don't want to give it all away just now, but all of the things that we do.
Gotcha. So yeah, let's talk about your because obviously we're going to get into patient recruitment. I want to get into virtual trials as well because everyone's talking about that. I want to get into traditional versus uh, social media recruitment, uh, grassroots approaches. I think everything works. It's just different strategies for different situations. But let's get into you. So, who are you, Ken? How did you get started in research? What's your
Uh,
background?
it's an interest. It's actually I find it to be an interesting story, and I think maybe two other viewers might agree with me. We'll see. But my undergrad degree is in communications and public relations with a minor in biology. So I started pre-med and midway through decided, you know what, I don't think I want to be a doctor and went completely the other direction and got a degree in communications, but I kept my interest in and minor in the science. So while one could think that I had this grand plan to end up in a place where I could marry my interest in and ability to understand the sciencey stuff with my creative and communication driven side to kind of end up in this kind of niche world, it really happened by, chance. Years ago, and this is back 20 years ago, so 1994, 95, we had a major pharmaceutical company as a client, and we were doing just general public relations stuff with them. I mean, they had a semi-sedating antihistamine they were trying to protect market share for when the first Claritin non-sedating antihistamine was right around the corner. So we were just doing general PR stuff. And at the time, my boss and her boss were at this company, and they were introduced to somebody in clinical. And they said, hey, you do marketing and stuff. Do you think you can help us reach out and find patients for an Alzheimer's disease trial? And them being the good client service providers they are, said, sure we can, whatever, no problem. And they handed them a big stack of stuff, which they came back to the office and then put on my desk and said, do this. And I learned all sorts of foreign words that day, like clinical trial and IRB and investigative site and clinical coordinator and informed consent. I knew nothing. I knew clinical trials existed, but I knew nothing about them. So I essentially wrote up a proposal which, quite frankly, minus all the internet stuff, doesn't look dramatically different than the stuff that's done today. It included some advertising, a call center, study awareness materials, public relations, letters to referring physicians. I will say that the call center was our receptionist, and I knew nothing about advertising, but it was all in the proposal. They approved it, we did it, and lo and behold, it worked. And it had to work because there really wasn't any approved medications for Alzheimer's disease back in the early 90s. So basically, if you built it, they will come. And that's essentially what happened. So my boss and I looked at each other and said, there's a business here. Not many people were doing it. In fact, there was only one company that was doing patient recruitment as a thing back at that time. So we built a company called Clinical Solutions because we were part of a larger healthcare marketing network, and they were very entrepreneurial in spirit. Like, they have an idea, come to us. So we built a company called Clinical Solutions, which, again, exclusively focused on patient recruitment, and it did a lot of the same stuff. That's actually where I met Evan. He made a very good cold call one day and said, I'm doing advertising. I've learned about clinical research. I think I can help you guys. And I happened to say, we have a proposal due Friday. If you can get me advertising numbers and we win the proposal, I'll give you the business. He got me the numbers, won the proposal. I gave him the business, and essentially he's placed every advertisement I've placed for clinical research over the next 20 years. That's why we got such a great working relationship and got to know each other really well and knew that we worked and clicked very well, and that's how we ended up joining forces. But so I ended up taking over Clinical Solutions in '99 and moved from Princeton, New Jersey, where it was, down here to Atlanta, Georgia, due to some the intersection between different companies in this healthcare network. There was a company down here that we became aligned with, so I moved down here to be closer to them. I stayed at Clinical Solutions till about '04, and then I left to start my own business called Clinical Trial Marketing Communications. And again, I come from that integrated marketing background. So essentially, any way you can think of to communicate the availability of a clinical trial, I've probably done it. I don't know, short of throwing a sandwich board on a guy and have him ringing a bell and walking across the city street, I've probably done it. But if I thought that would make sense, I'd probably recommend it.
It might work.
Yeah, you never know, right? So I come from that integrated marketing background because, in my opinion, the clinical trial's the thing, right? So it's the thing that I happen to market. But the strategies that one would use to market anything are generally appropriate to market a clinical trial, which in the confines of, making sure you control the message and IRB approval and things like that. But how you go about communicating the availability of the trial is not dramatically different how you would go about communicating the availability of something, whatever that thing happens to be. So fast forward, I ended up doing the clinical trial marketing communications thing for a while, always working with Evan. And again, a couple of years ago, we were like, we got to figure out a way to join forces. Me coming from the integrated marketing background, him as the patient advertising guru coming really from the media buying avenue. We're like, that's most of what he's done over the course of his career. There was a real opportunity to not only do more of what Guru has been good at, which is, helping sites better utilize the advertising budgets that sponsors provide, or managing central advertising campaigns, plus bringing on some of the other things, some of the more integrated marketing things, which could be anything, again, any way to communicate a message. That's kind of the roundabout way of how I got into patient recruitment. So really since 1995-ish, I'm one of the dinosaurs in the industry, although I feel young and spry. I've been doing this a long time exclusively. It's all I've been doing for a very, very long time.
Wow. So now going on your third decade now for clinical reasons. Yeah, it's crazy.
Update my bio.
You got to update it. Yeah, me too. We were just talking earlier before we started recording. 2020, what a time to be alive. But at the same time, you look back and realize, how are we already here? This is crazy. But this is actually a great transition. I think this is like a record year for research. I don't know what you're seeing on your end. I don't know. Are your clients mostly sites or sponsors?
It's interesting. We have a lot of individual sites that are our clients because again, what happens is, and I'm sure you see this as well, back in 1990, whatever, it was very common for a sponsor to give sites $5,000 just to advertise with. Here, go do something with this. Mm-hmm. Fast forward to now 2020, and it's still not uncommon for sponsors to give sites $5,000 to advertise with. So it hasn't really dramatically increased over the decades. But what happens is that, as you well know, because you talk to a lot of study coordinators, is that they're really good at their jobs. They're great nurses, or they're great administrators, or they're great clinical coordinators, but what they're not generally trained in is becoming good advertisers. So what happens is they're given this advertising budget, and most of the time, the responsibility for figuring out how to effectively utilize this advertising budget falls onto the ever overburdened shoulders of that study coordinator. So suddenly, they have to figure out, what do I need to do? How do I spend this money in an effective way? So suddenly they have to become either copywriters, open up Word and type up an ad, and hopefully it resonates with the target audience. They have to go, well, let me call the local radio station and see what advertising costs. And what we find is that we can do better. We can get more for the advertising dollar because not only do we follow a direct response philosophy, and that means not only in the type of media we buy, but the way spots are written. Because in order for them to work, they need to reach the right person at the right time, in the right mechanism, strategically, with the right message to motivate them, to have them resonate, to have it resonate with them. So yeah, this is me. Let me find out more and make the ability to learn more as easy as possible, whether it's visiting a website or calling a toll-free number or calling the site directly. So how you say that and how you frame it is different than, say, someone who's just trying to create awareness of something. If McDonald's is advertising their new fresh beef quarter pounder and you see that ad on the TV, they are not expecting you to shut up the TV, grab your keys, hop in the car, and go get a fresh beef quarter pounder right now. They'd love it if you did. But that's not the intent. The intent is the next time you're out and about, the next time you're hungry, you see the golden arches. Remember, we've got these fresh beef quarter pounders. Come in and give them a whirl. We're the direct opposite of that. We want them to do the metaphorical equivalent of turning off the TV and grabbing their keys. We want them to say, that's me. That sounds interesting. Let me at least find out some more information. And like I said, either go to a website or call the phone number. So following that philosophy, so balancing that strategy and that creativity, so we've got this good set of copy that we've written that the intent is to educate and motivate and resonate and then get that response. And we've married it with a good direct response media plan, meaning that there are certain times of day, days of week, formats on the radio, programming on television that are much better for direct response so that we're putting it in their hands at the right time. We want them to call right now. So if we've got to balance that strategy to creativity, meaning that if I know exactly what I need to say in order to motivate them to respond, yet strategically where I place that message is off, it's not going to get the response we all want. Mm-hmm. Conversely, if I strategically know exactly where I want to put that message, but creatively I'm not saying the right thing, again, not going to get the response that we want. And I feel that people get degrees in this stuff, right? People get degrees in copywriting and media buying. So there's an art and a science to it, right? Can anybody open up Word and type up an ad? Sure. Can anybody call the local radio station and order some spots? Sure. But is it the best ad and is it the best schedule? Maybe, but probably not. Or if they do happen to buy the right thing, are they paying the lowest price for it? Right. That's in there too, especially with these limited budgets. So kind of a roundabout answer to your question. When we work with the sites directly, they essentially give us a call and say, hey, we've got $5,000 and we're trying to advertise for an eczema study. Can you help us? And yeah, that's where we come in and we'll develop the ad. We'll place the advertising for them. We can manage the responses. We have some tools in place to do that, or the calls can go directly to the site because this is a local program. And that's just what we do. We come in and make their job easier so that the study coordinator doesn't have to write the ad, analyze the media, place the media, track the media, pay the media, in addition to all of the other things that they're responsible for doing, right? That's a lot more work to do for however many studies on which they're working, that if they just need to do the things that a coordinator is responsible for to do, their day will be a lot easier.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So on the other hand, we've got sponsor clients as well. So we've got some sponsors that work with us a number of different ways. We've got some either CRO clients or we've got some sponsor clients who will hire us, and they'll either say, we've got 20 sites and $5,000 per site, get in touch with all the sites, see who wants to do what, and then come back to us and we'll kind of decide. Others will say, hey, I've got a couple of sites I want to put you in touch with, go and do it with those couple and we'll work with those sites. But where it's most efficient, we've got a number of sponsors that do this where they aggregate their media dollars. So if they've got that 20 site $5,000 budget, so they've got an aggregate media budget of $100,000, essentially they'll give that money to us and then we'll go and work with the sites to allocate those dollars as efficiently as possible. Because advertising in New York is a heck of a lot more expensive than advertising in Dubuque, Iowa. So the $5,000 might be too much in Dubuque and not nearly enough in New York. But by putting those dollars all at the top, we can cut a little out of Dubuque, still giving them an efficient and effective media campaign, but be able to reallocate some of those dollars to the markets that are more expensive. Of course, the New Yorks,
with
the LAs,
same
the
budget,
DCs,
yeah.
with that same budget, which is something they cannot do if they work on their own. You know, if they're just giving that money to sites on a site-by-site basis, there's no efficiency. And we come in and do the efficiency. Plus, we can come in and what we call manage centrally. So there are certain things that we can manage centrally. All of the creative development, all of the response management, all of the approvals are all done centrally, but then the execution is all done locally. So it's still the site's money, so they still should get a say in how that money is allocated. So some might say, yeah, I want to do television. Others might say, no, I just want to do radio. Some might say, no, I just want to do some online stuff. because it's their money. They let us know how they want to use it, and then we'll do that for them. So they have input on what we're doing, so they have more ownership because they've bought into who we are, what we're doing, and how we can add value without losing the say that they lose in some sort of centralized program that is done way at the top and doesn't take the local needs or the local preferences to heart the way our programs would. And I've done them. I've done tons of centralized programs, but the sites truly appreciate these local programs because they have input and they can wrap their arms around what we're doing.
That makes sense. Before we started recording, I was on my Site Owner Academy. I have a weekly mastermind with site owners across the country, and I didn't know this topic would come up during the interview, but one of the PIs was complaining about a big central advertising company, recruitment company, and saying how he'll never work with them again because they just pressure them, give them more work than than the CRAs are even giving them, and the leads are no good. So this is very interesting. I think you guys have created a solution to a big problem. In my opinion, patient recruitment is the biggest problem in research and will always be, and virtual trials is not going to change that. We're going to get into that next. But I also think that the best way to recruit patients is through the physician's own database, but usually those are exhausted early. Right. So then you depend on just about every site in every study will exhaust their database and need a vendor, but they don't know where to go. So I was in this position also. Now we're working with a Facebook guy. He's just a regular contractor who runs our Facebook ads. Seems to be working okay, but perhaps I'll put Monica in touch with you to use Patient Advertising Guru for some of our studies. So I do think there's a huge need here, but what do you see for the industry going forward? And actually, before we get there, I always tell, because we have a lot of people watching who are looking to get into the industry, and I always tell them, start at the site level and start learning how to recruit patients. Meaning going out in the community, going to support groups, posting ads on Craigslist. They're usually free. Learn how to do Facebook ads, but then maybe learn some strategies from Patient Advertising Guru, or learn that you exist and contact Ken. Figure out ways to provide value to the sites. This is how you gain entry into the industry. I believe patient recruitment is the best way to go about doing that. What do you think about this strategy? Do you think this is a good idea for people to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, the rubber meets the road at the site level for their ability to fill studies. And always your own patients are the best because they have a history with you, they're trusting, and you trust them to do what they say they're going to do. And anytime you bring somebody in from the outside, there's risk, right? But as we've seen, I don't know what the current statistic is, but 90% of trials fail to enroll on time.
Yeah.
So the need to go outside of the practice is common for most sites. And I always want to caveat and say most sites. There are plenty of sites out there that have internal marketing departments, that have really smart people in place to do media and social media and grassroots stuff. But that's the anomaly, as we all know. Yeah. Most of the time, it's the coordinator. And we've heard the receptionist has been in charge of creating and placing ads before at certain sites. So you just never know.
That's very common. Very common.
So yeah, I have this philosophy of expert to do expert work. If you gave me a blood pressure cuff, I might ultimately be able to figure out how to take somebody's blood pressure, but not nearly as well as somebody who does it every day. So with patient recruitment being with not all, because if you're just going out and speaking to the community or things like that, there's really no marketing expertise required. There's just knowledge about your subject matter,
right?
And everything that goes in with that. But when it comes to the more nuanced and specialized stuff, it's a marketing thing. So it's all learnable. You don't have to get a degree in marketing to become patient recruitment, but you have to have strong copywriting skills and analytical skills. You have to understand, the correct philosophies about how media works. You have to understand pricing and all of them, all of the things that I don't even truly get into on a daily basis that go into building a solid media plan. So anywhere that someone can add value makes sense for building themselves up in any particular industry. So if somebody joins at the site level and they prove they have value by either doing some of the grassroots stuff or learning social media or, becoming a really strong copywriter because they're doing their homework and they're figuring out what it takes to say the things that need to be said to make people consider clinical research as an option. Because remember, the main hurdle anyone who's marketing a clinical trial has to jump is that there's an inherent distrust of clinical research in the global patient population. We are in the industry. We know that physicians, the investigators, have the best interest of their patients' subjects at heart. We know that the coordinators are caring, even though there are rules out there that they can't be too caring because they're not patients, they're subjects, but they still want to have their best interests at heart. But people outside of the industry, the only thing they ever hear about clinical trials is the bad stuff. There's the front page news about that one person who might have had an adverse event and unfortunately maybe died. That's what they're hearing about clinical trials. So anything that you or I or anyone who's marketing a clinical trial has to do is not only make them think that this is a viable option for them, but overcome whatever bias they might have about whatever they might have heard about a clinical trial at some point in the past. Now, they might ultimately think, yeah, this is a potential option for me. Let me find out more. But then their opinion about the process starts to form. One of the questions I often ask certain clients is, when do we believe their opinion about your clinical trial begins to form? My answer is the instant they hit the last number on their phone when they're making a phone call. How many rings? Is it a busy signal? Is it a voicemail? Is the person they talk to knowledgeable? Were they curt? Were they sympathetic? Were they engaged? They're already forming opinions about this specific opportunity, which build upon whatever bias they may have consciously or unconsciously possessed in their minds. Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent on whoever's on the other end of that phone to start the retention process long before the recruitment process is even finished. Because they might ultimately, even if they had a long hold time or a busy signal or it took 2 days to get a phone call back, or the person was, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now, I'll call you tomorrow, because we know how frazzled some people can be. They might ultimately enroll, but in the back of their mind, they're like, I don't know, I had a weird feeling about this anyway. And the minute the going gets tough, they're gone. So it's incumbent upon everyone in the process to know what's being required of the person who's participating in this trial and try and make the process as easy as possible. And that starts at the first response all the way through their very last visit. What can we do to make their lives a little bit easier? I mean, I'll go off on a little anecdote. Most people, when I ask, if I'm in a meeting with a bunch of pharmaceutical people, I'll ask, how many of you have actually participated in a clinical trial? Most of the time, no hands go up, or maybe one or two, which is a rarity. So most people in clinical research have no idea exactly what it is we're asking someone to do as part of a trial. So a number of years ago, I wanted to answer that question. So I joined a clinical trial. It was a healthy person study. I just had to take some medicines and report on how they made my belly felt. And I didn't have to do very much outside of that, but I did have to go to monthly visits for 6 months. And the problem was that they had terrible hours, they had terrible parking, and which means that I live in the Atlanta area, which is, I don't know, the second or third worst traffic cities in the country. So either they wanted me to come in the morning with traffic, or the end of the day where you have to come back in traffic. And I was a highly motivated participant. I was doing this just to figure out what the experience was like. And by like the third month, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I did it, I finished, but I didn't want to.
They didn't have Uber Health or anything like that?
Not at the time. Not at the time.
Oh, this was a while ago. Okay.
I had to drive myself. Yeah, it was a number of years ago.
Gotcha.
So, but even still, you still have to sit in the traffic, even if you're in the back of an Uber, right? So it's still going to take 2 hours longer than it should if I can't go at like noon. Because traffic in Atlanta, they say, it's from like 8 to 10 is morning traffic, from 10 to 12 is lunchtime traffic, and from like 12 to 5 is afternoon traffic. There's just never a time where there's not traffic. So we just have to keep in mind that as we figure out how to recruit these patients, we have to make sure that kind of every step every step we keep in mind exactly what it is, we're asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, circling back to your question, anywhere that a person interested in clinical research can add value to that, any of the steps in that chain, allows them to kind of learn more about it and ultimately, move forward, I'd say.
That's actually good. I'm glad you shared that, because now these people who are trying to work at sites as patient recruiters, they could also be retention specialists. So all those pain points you just mentioned, maybe they can do something to help alleviate some of those, or maybe they can just communicate extra to them, or something to keep the patients engaged, motivated to continue.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier these days with like texting and stuff. So you can certainly, back in the day before texting, everything required a phone call and maybe an email. Well, you can still do that because the personal touch, I never want the personal touch to go away. But, the convenience of texting at just about any age group these days is great. Like, I'm not a kid, but I'd much rather get a text any day of the week than a phone call. Yep. And I know that there are a lot of people who are much younger than me who don't even answer the telephone.
There's some people that are upset when people call them.
Exactly. It's like you get a voicemail. Don't leave me a voicemail. I'm not going to check it. Just text me. I'm not that guy, but there are people who are just like that. But luckily, the texting allows you to stay in touch in a kind of casual and informal and frequent way. And of course, there are ways that you can do that on an automated, where it's invisible to the patient.
You just gave so many nuggets for people who want to work at sites as a recruitment and retention specialist. You just go replay this last 10 minutes of this conversation. You hear all the pain points that can actually experience as a patient, and then you try to find ways to solve those problems. Do you want to give any advice to people on? Well, first of all, what's your guys' core competency? Are you guys more of the traditional media? Are you social media? Are you running Facebook ads, Instagram? What works best in a 2020 world for recruiting patients?
The answer from an advertising standpoint is all of the above. So we do a lot of traditional media, and we do a lot more television. When we talk about traditional media, of course, it's going to be TV, radio, and print. Mm-hmm. There are other options, of course, like billboards and transit and other types of non-traditional yet not online types of marketing. And we've done it. We've done things that put the flyers in the men's urinals for men's health studies and all sorts of stuff like that. But we spend a lot of time and energy on the three main traditionals, which is television, radio, and print. And at the site level, most sites don't do television on their own because they believe it is complicated and expensive. Our job is to uncomplicate it and show them that in many cases they can afford it. So we do a ton of that, millions and millions of dollars a year in traditional media. But last year we launched our Research Study Rockstar Digital Social Strategy. We have our whole theme. If you go to our website, Patient Advertising Guru, you'll see the whole Let's Rock and Roll theme. So we kind of carried that through. Yeah, it's Let's Rock and Roll.
I get it.
So we've carried that through to our what we call our Research Study Rockstar social media campaign, and it's not just social because it's could be Google and it could be advertising on other websites like support groups and stuff. But by and large, it's a lot of Facebook, a lot of Instagram, then with supplemental other things. And the way we were able to build that is that where we were in the food chain, because remember sometimes we're interacting with the sites and talking about how they want to utilize their dollars. Sometimes they say, well, we want to place it with this company who does some digital social stuff, or with this company who does some digital social stuff. And we are fine. We'll place it on them for you. So we got to understand how some of these other companies do what they do. So we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. We saw ways that it could be improved. And we then ultimately built and then refined and officially launched Research Study Rockstar the middle part of 2019, which again, we believe improved upon a lot of what we saw other companies doing in the digital space, a lot of proprietary stuff about how we do the algorithms and how we reach people and how we refine. But it's all paying off. We've done, I'm going to think since June, I know Evan's got some, and again, we'll do it centrally, meaning that the sponsor might have us do it in aggregate for all of their 100 sites. And I've worked with probably 50 sites since then to do maybe 100+ programs, and the cost per click, the cost per referral is incredible. We're looking at, in some cases, $12 per referral for a common condition, 35, $40 per referral for a less common condition, which when you compare it to traditional media, it's definitely cheaper. But everything has a place. That doesn't mean it's the death of the traditional, because there's room for everything. You're not going to reach everybody in one place. So making sure they have a well-rounded media plan makes sense, which is why a lot of our central campaigns will have some traditional stuff and have some online stuff, because you're going to get people where their eyeballs happen to be. And we might place that television spot on, traditional network television, or maybe it's going to go on Hulu. We might take our radio spot and place it on the local stations where the sites are located, or maybe it'll go on Spotify. So we try and mix the, traditional and the digital when we have creative that we can, kind of mix and match.
I like the fact that you guys are purely advertising, because, and actually your thing earlier about McDonald's kind of stuck with me. I actually got inspired to do a video, like another advice for people trying to get into sites at entry-level positions. We talk about starting out as a recruiter. That might actually be too difficult for many people. I think starting out as a retention specialist and then a branding expert for the site, because what McDonald's is doing is branding, okay? Like they're just trying to brand that image into your head, so that next time you're out there, you go get the cheeseburger, whatever they want you to buy. What you guys are doing is marketing, right? It's advertising. You are paying money. You want people to take action now. You don't want them to think about this later. I think sites need both. I think sites confuse the two things. So they think that what you guys are doing is branding. It's actually not, right? And then what they're doing as branding is marketing, which it is, but it's not advertising. So I think recruiting, retention, branding, advertising, these are all different things that you can actually streamline and have different positions. So I think I'm going to do a video on branding, how to be a branding expert, like setting up a blog for the site. Most sites don't have a blog.
No.
Right? But if you're someone who knows how to write well, fairly well, have you seen some of these blogs online? You don't even have to write well. Okay? Create a blog. What's the indication? If you don't know much about medicine, talk about the area that they're in, Atlanta. Talk about the neighborhoods in Atlanta. So I think there's a lot of things sites can do to merge these two things together. I think what you guys do requires way more technical know-how. So I think that should be outsourced for the most part at most sites. Like you said, there are those outliers that have those departments, but I think a lot of people ignore the branding in research, and I think the branding actually is going to help sites recruit easier in the long run.
Yeah, because a lot of what I talk about certain sites with, and if the sites really have, some visibility, this works well for like site networks where they've got multiple locations. Their ultimate business objective should be to own the clinical trial space in their market. So they're branding themselves as the clinical trial experts of Atlanta or Lexington, Kentucky, whatever it happens to be.
Right.
So that when they have the ability to recruit for a specific study, some of that heavy lifting has already been done. They already have done a fair amount of education about who ABC Clinical Research is. And everything that they do follows the same theme, the same logo, the same idea. So if they do ads, use the same music, use the same voice, use all the same, so that when people start to hear it, they know that it's ABC Clinical Research. They just have to see what this one is for.
Yeah.
So they're going out to the community saying, this is what a clinical research is. This is what we do. This is why you should think about it. This is, why altruism is great, and we own the space, and we're great at what we do, and we're respectable when we're involved in your community. And then someday when you go and ask them for an eczema patient, you don't have to sell yourself anymore. You're only selling this particular opportunity. Right. And if somebody decides this opportunity is right for them, they don't have to decide, well, who the heck is ABC Clinical Research? Because if you've got a local physician who's got credibility, or they're part of, if you're working with academic sites like here in Atlanta, if it's Piedmont or Northside, they've already done that. So you go, oh, it's at Northside, it's at Emory. I know those guys. They're great. But when you're ABC Clinical Research,
Mm-hmm.
who's that? Nobody's in. I don't know. They're going to be around in a couple of weeks. I never heard of this place because there's not any name recognition that comes with research-only clinics, or in most cases, private practice physicians' offices.
And that's the opportunity for everyone watching and listening. If you want to work at ABC Clinic, you don't just walk in there and say, "Hey, let me intern." I mean, that you could try. That's better than sitting at home. But you go in there and say, "Hey, I noticed you guys don't have an Instagram. You don't have a Facebook page. You don't have a blog. You don't have a podcast. I can do all those things for you. And I'll do it for free. I just want to get some clinical research experience under my belt." I don't know too many sites that would say no to that. I think some sites would say, "Okay, let's start with Instagram. I want to see what kind of work you do, or start with a podcast, whatever." But that's now you're going in with something with value, some kind of value. So thank you very much for sharing that and for explaining the differences between branding and advertising. Uh, let's get into 2020. Okay. Uh, what do you see this year? This is supposed to be a busy, super busy year, right?
Supposed to be, yeah.
It's supposed to be a record year for clinical research. So we're also hearing buzzwords of virtual trials, right? Like that's the huge industry buzzword right now, virtual trials. So this is another topic we talked about in our Site Owner Academy earlier today. Virtual trials is built on the foundation that somehow patients are going to find these studies, because they're basically taking out all the doctors that recruit patients in their own practices. So now
Right.
you have one virtual PI. He's going to Skype with you just like we're Skyping now. Okay, he's going to Skype with you. Somehow those patients are going to be put into this situation. Just magic, right? Uh, this is why I think virtual trials, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the recruitment side before that's something that we can even talk about as being successful. And
Yeah.
no one has demonstrated yet that there is a proven way of getting patients into these virtual trials. It's new. But are you guys at Patient Advertising Guru, are you getting projects with virtual trials? Are you getting asked things like this from sponsors? What's your take on this?
Yeah, but like you, I've seen, again, and like you, we've been reading articles and hearing about, the coming of virtual clinical trials for quite some time. The technology may finally be catching up with the ability to actually do them, which is great. And I think I just read a couple articles on LinkedIn in the last couple of days about some things that are actually going to be happening as it relates to running some virtual clinical trials. Um, but it doesn't solve the patient recruitment problem, because just like a lot of sponsors in the traditional model continue to believe, even though, again, we go back to that 90% fail to enroll on time statistic, they have this "if you build it, they will come" belief.
Right.
I'm just going to set up my clinical trial and the patients are going to come in, right? A virtual clinical trial is no different. You can't just build it and hope that people are going to find it. There still needs to be some, probably the exact same sorts of outreach in order to create that awareness and get people to come, whether it's all done digitally or there's some traditional media driving them to some website or landing page or something. There still needs to be some awareness creative and response generated to get people into these trials.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the virtual clinical trial eliminates a lot of the pain points we talked about, the travel and other things that go into making the participation in trials so complicated, but it doesn't give you the numbers you need to fill the trial without doing something. Now, I haven't read, there are a lot of companies like in the background between how a virtual clinical trial is running, and I haven't really gotten into or read how they plan to attack the patient recruitment problem, nor have we yet been asked to bid on any virtual clinical trials.
Okay.
But the need for recruitment doesn't go away.
Yeah, so I was at a panel. I was on a panel talk at a conference last year, 2019, and they were talking about this topic. And they said, so pharma's answer is, well, we have patient influencers. and they call them e-patients or engaged patients or empowered patients, something like that. But these are patients with a following. Basically, patients who did what we just talked about 5 minutes ago that the sites should be doing, right? Building themselves up as experts
Yeah.
in their domain. So the guy gave an example of, I think it was someone with asthma. I can't remember the indication, but he had a blog and he had like hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So in theory, the pharma can pay this blogger, this influencer, to send a mass email, and then all his trusted followers will be interested or more likely to participate in the study. Problem is, I think this is theory because I've looked for these influencers and they're here and there. There's a lot of them in the oncology space, which is actually one space that doesn't need much help with recruiting. But like when you're talking about Alzheimer's, when you're talking about anything with skin, I think with beauty you have some influencers, but psychiatry is an example, or diabetes. I haven't really seen these influencers. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong places. Yeah. And even if they exist, what's to say that they're going to take the money from pharma? Because essentially then they're selling out their audience, and who's going to know how their audience is going to react to them?
Yeah. From my perspective, it's a strategy that's as good as any other strategy. And it's great to have that in your bag of tricks, but it may not solve the problem. It may not enroll all of the patients. So it's
Right.
it's a great thing to try. I mean, I have no issues with utilizing it. If I had a list of patient influencers, I'd tap them.
Yeah.
And then when, just like with a site database is exhausted, you figure out, okay, what's next?
Right.
We have to go social, digital. Do we have to go Google? Do we have to go traditional? Then you solve the problem the same way you're going to solve the problem any other time.
Right.
So, but again, there's still, so it's funny because one of the things we continue to find, I mean, patient recruitment's been a thing now for, 20 some odd years, but it's still underfunded at the sponsor level. They're often not allocating budget designed to recruit patients.
Right.
Even, we interact with lots of sites who say, yeah, I'd love to work with you on this eczema study, but the sponsor's not even giving us any money. Or they're giving us $1,000. It just doesn't make any sense, right? The way I look at it is, think about a brand manager who is awaiting the approval of the drug that just finished its clinical trial, and it gets his approval letter, and he sits back and goes, got my approval letter, let the prescription start rolling in. Doesn't happen. They've got advertising and med ed and PR. Heck, they've got an entire sales force invested in, all designed to make sure that the people who need to know about that new drug are made aware to drive prescriptions.
Highly trained sales force.
However, with the clinical trials, I got my protocol done, got my site selected, let the patients start rolling in. No. The expectation should be, and the exception to the rule should be no investment, but the expectation should be that there should be an investment to make sure that the people who need to know are made aware so that they can ultimately elect to respond and participate. So it's kind of a weird thing. So I say that because if they're already, for this virtual clinical trial model, they've already decided that we're going to pay these influencers, that's one step further than they're going with their non-traditional, non-virtual trials, because they're often not allocating any dollars to pay anybody to enroll anybody.
Which are still 99% of studies even as of 2020. We're in the new decade. It's still the same old stuff. So how can sites or sponsors get a hold of you? Do you guys, so how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. Forget everything. If you forget anything else that I said, just remember Patient Advertising Guru, and that's our website as well, patientadvertisingguru.com. My email address is simple, ken@patientadvertisingguru.com. That's probably the easiest way to find us. If you go to the website, obviously there's a contact us block on there that you could just put in your info and get in touch. Or you can email me directly and I can answer any questions. I'll just say that from a site perspective, I don't want any site to think, well, it's too complicated or we don't have enough budget or whatever. it's always worth asking the question. I get a call. They might say, I have $1,000. Can you do something for me? It's something I'll have to noodle on. So never think that your budget is too small to at least look into something,
Yeah,
because who knows?
$1,000 goes a long way. On
Yeah,
Instagram ads are pretty cheap.
yeah, we might be able to even help you craft something to extract additional advertising dollars. Because a lot of times if you can justify it, then the sponsor might be willing to make the investment. So if we can help you justify it by coming up with a plan that you can then turn around and just submit to the sponsor, and we do this for sites all the time. We're saying, hey, the site will say, hey, I think I can get $5,000 from the sponsor. I just need to give them something. So we'll draw up a proposal of what we would do, give it to them. They essentially just send it directly to the sponsor, and then they'll call us in a week and say, we're good to go.
I like
and
that.
Then we can do the plan. So you don't have to wait around and wonder. You can get some questions answered, and I can be a resource as well. If you have questions about anything, if you wanted to do it on your own and you had some questions about the direct response philosophy, let me know. What we find is a lot of times the sites will order advertising on the radio station that's playing in their office. I will say this little tidbit of information, never ever do that. The reason is it's playing in your office precisely because you're not paying any attention to it. It's background noise. Not good for direct response. So there's a tidbit for everybody. Never place advertising on the station you're playing in your office.
I think people do that because they want to hear, they want to feel good when they hear it.
They want to hear it, yep, and it's the one they know.
And it's like putting a billboard on your route back home from work. Like, hey, you see yourself every day.
I have a buddy of mine who's a dentist, and that's exactly what he did. Put it between his office and his house, so he could see a 60-foot version of himself every day.
Any more tidbits of nuggets? Because this is I'll give one. So I talk about branding. First of all, I think any site should outsource this kind of stuff. Like when it comes to TV, radio, print. I think sites can manage the Craigslist, maybe some Facebook and Instagram. I think what sites really can manage and should manage is their own branding. I don't think that should be outsourced. I think somebody at the site should do that regularly. And if you're out there watching and you want to work at a site, or you are working at a site and no one has that, you do it. But I think the branding and the advertising can work well together, because if you create content through branding, and then you find a video that works, you now know, okay, hey, I could put some money behind this one to see, how much we can get out of this particular piece of content. So what advice do you have like that? Like if a site's calling a radio company or something like that, what free advice do you have for them?
Well, if they happen to be calling a radio station, often they'll sell you what they have to sell. So have in mind what it is you want to buy, so that you're not inclined to be pressured to buy what they have to sell. Because often what they have to sell, they'll sell you volume. They'll say, oh, you got $5,000? I'll give you 100 spots. And I'll just say this, maybe we'll get 20 or 25. But the 100 spots they might sell you might include 10 good ones and 90 bad ones. Overnights, weekends, places where you don't want to advertise for direct response for your trial. So don't necessarily look at volume when buying radio advertising. Look at quality. Know where you want to be from a direct response standpoint, and try and buy that, rather than just saying, hey, I've got advertised for my clinical trial. I've got $5,000. What do you want me to do? And you'll start getting dazzled by volume. Wow, I can get $20 a spot. That's great. Let's sign me up. When you're going to get no value from it whatsoever. We run into that more times than I care to admit when sites are evaluating perhaps our plan versus something they might have done in the past, where in a normal size market, we might, I said 25, we can get maybe 40 or 50 spots for that are good. Maybe they got 100, most of which were not good.
Gotcha.
So, and to kind of circle back, yeah, I agree that the branding definitely should happen at the site level. They can absolutely handle the site list. And it all comes back to, can they handle all of this stuff? Yeah, but it comes down to resource allocation, right? Should they be bothered with handling the social advertising? If they want to manage the social media presence, by all means do it. But when it comes to creating and managing an online marketing strategy, it's the same as with the traditional side. There are nuances to it that you could probably get more value by outsourcing it to Guru and save yourself time, because it's one less thing that you'll have to check multiple times a day to make sure that you're doing the right things, that everything is kind of turned on and everything. So if you've got the bandwidth, if you're one of the rare coordinators that has all the free time in the world and has a great, likes that to do Facebook marketing as a hobby, do it all day. But if you're like all the other study coordinators who are way overworked and don't have one more second to fit one more thing in, why learn a new thing?
Yeah, that's not the core
competency. It's going to take extra hours out of your day when it could easily be managed by an expert. Now, here's another key thing, and this is something I'll bring up. From an advertising standpoint, if we work with a site to do their advertising, we don't charge any fees to the site. So in essence, aside from development, it's free to work with us.
Right.
So there's really no downside, because we get paid a commission by the media. As a recognized media buyer, much like when you buy and sell a house, the seller pays the commission. So it's free for the buyer to buy the house. It's the same thing. As a recognized media buyer, we get a commission from the media. So that's how we're compensated. So if they have that $5,000 to spend on advertising, we're going to buy them $5,000 worth of better advertising than they can ever buy on their own, and they don't have to pay us for it. We get compensated by the media.
Makes sense.
And it's all standard. It's not like one media is going to pay us more commission and we're going to pick and choose. It's industry standard stuff. So we're going to buy the best schedule for what we're trying to accomplish, and it doesn't cost the site an extra penny. So there's no downside to working with us, because it's not like we're going to carve $1,000 off their ad budget to pay ourselves and then only spend $4,000 on advertising. They're going to get their full value of their advertising with a lot more expertise without having to do it themselves, essentially for free.
So they get the full value. Well, and in all cases, it's essentially free because they already have a budget for that. It's an invoiceable cost usually. Like when the site has to find the vendor and all that. When the sponsor takes care of it, that's great because sites don't have to do anything. But when the sites have to choose their vendor, even then it's free. I mean, yeah, you have to pay up front. You have to do the work of sourcing Patient Advertising Guru. But even then it's free because they'll get it reimbursed. But what you're saying is that full $5,000
exactly
will go into all the ad spending. There's no cut for you guys. You guys get it back from the media companies.
Exactly. And that's the way any media advertising, it's not special. That's the way everybody, you see an ad when you're watching, NCIS at night and you're watching an ad, the ad to come to the place that got paid a commission. It's just how it works. So, but yeah, they get the full value, I should say. So yeah, it's all free. It's not out of their pockets, but they're getting their full $5,000, whatever the budget happens to be, a full amount of advertising placed, and they don't have to carve any of that out.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I always thought media companies take a part out for themselves.
No, it works. Well, and that's the same with sponsors as well.
What a time to be alive, guys. So thank you very much, Ken, for educating us. Again, Patient Advertising Guru. The link will be, I'm looking at it now. It looks like a rock concert.
That's right.
It's amazing.
We will make your next study rock.
Enroll.
That's what you'll see on the website.
PatientAdvertisingGuru.com. Link will be in the show notes and on the YouTube channel links. Ken, thank you very much. Again, give people your email if they want to reach out to you.
You got it. It is Ken at Patient Advertising Guru. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Ken Wallace with Patient Advertising Guru, and you can certainly hit me up there. If all other mechanisms are forgotten and you just remember my name, Ken Wallace, you can hit me up on LinkedIn as well. So I'm not hard to find. I'm not hiding. I'm easy. So
very good. Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, Guru Nation, for listening, watching, and catch y'all later. Bye-bye.